The insistent drumming of a migraine had driven Ethan Maxwell from his office far earlier than usual. The meticulously scheduled afternoon of back-to-back board meetings and strategic analyses had been abruptly torpedoed by the throbbing pain behind his eyes, a rare surrender for a man who equated rest with failure. He let himself into the cavernous silence of his penthouse, the city's muted roar a distant hum beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. He rarely used the sprawling staff wing of the apartment. His live-in housekeeper, a new, almost ghost-like young woman named Lily Chen, managed those areas with an efficiency that required little to no interaction with him. But today, the circuit breaker for his private study had inexplicably tripped, and he remembered his building manager mentioning the main panel was located somewhere near the staff quarters, an area he'd never personally explored. Shrugging off his suit jacket, he navigated the unfamiliar corridor, his footsteps echoing slightly on the polished marble. He found a door that seemed to lead to a utility space, slightly ajar. Assuming it was a closet housing the electrical panel, he pushed it open without a second thought. The sight that met his eyes slammed into him with the force of an unexpected impact, stopping him dead in his tracks. It wasn't a utility closet. It was a small, neat bedroom, clearly Lily Chen's. And Lily Chen herself was there, back to him, midway through changing. For a frozen second, all Ethan registered was the pale, vulnerable line of her spine, the delicate curve of her shoulders, skin that looked impossibly soft. She was humming a quiet, almost melancholic tune, utterly unaware of his presence. Then she turned, perhaps sensing a shift in the air, a subtle change in the light. Her eyes, wide and startled, met his. A small gasp escaped her lips, her hands flying up to clutch the simple cotton shift she held against herself. A wave of crimson flooded her face, a blush so intense it seemed to physically pain her. Mortification, pure and absolute, was etched in every line of her body as she instinctively tried to shrink away, to disappear. Ethan felt his own blood run cold, a different kind of shock seizing him. He hadn't meant to intrude, hadn't meant to see this. He opened his mouth, then closed it, no words, no apology, nothing adequate coming to mind. He simply backed away, pulling the door shut with a quiet click that sounded deafening in the sudden, charged silence. He retreated down the corridor, his migraine forgotten, his mind replaying the image not of her nakedness, but of the sheer, unadulterated terror in her eyes, the absolute panic of her exposed vulnerability. It wasn't just a body he saw, it was an innocence so profound, so unguarded. In that accidental, shattering moment, it felt like a physical blow. Lily Chen was a creature of quiet corners and diligent, unobtrusive work. At 22, she carried the weight of her family's hopes on her slender shoulders. Her parents had immigrated from a small village in China with dreams of a better life, only to face years of struggle in New York City. Lily, their eldest, had absorbed their ethos of relentless hard work and unwavering familial duty. Every dollar she earned as Ethan Maxwell's live-in housekeeper, a position secured through a reputable agency that vetted its staff rigorously, was meticulously budgeted a portion sent home to help with her father's modest grocery store and to support her younger brother's college education. She had chosen this isolating job, despite its inherent loneliness, for its stability and the provided accommodation, which significantly reduced her living expenses. Her days were a routine of silent, meticulous care for Ethan Maxwell's vast, sterile penthouse, a space so opulent it felt more like a museum than a home. She moved through it like a whisper, her primary goal to be efficient and, above all, invisible to its formidable owner. Her shyness was profound, a deeply ingrained part of her nature, stemming from a reserved upbringing and a natural inclination towards introspection. It wasn't an affectation. Large personalities and direct confrontations genuinely overwhelmed her. Her innocence was equally authentic, a product of a life focused on responsibility and study, with little room or inclination for the casual entanglements or jaded experiences of many her age in the bustling city. She valued her dignity fiercely and guarded her privacy as if it were her most precious possession, which, in many ways, it was. Her fear of Mr. Maxwell was a constant low hum beneath her daily tasks. He was an imposing figure of immense power and wealth, his standards exacting, his presence capable of making the air itself feel charged and thin. Ethan Maxwell, on the other hand, thrived in that charged atmosphere, or rather, he created it. He was a titan of the financial technology world, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from a single, brilliant idea and an almost inhuman capacity for work. His mind was a fortress of logic and strategy, his days scheduled down to the minute, his focus unwavering. His penthouse, with its panoramic city views and minimalist, almost cold decor, was less a home and more an extension of his controlled, orderly existence. He ate most of his meals there alone, prepared by Lily but often consumed while reviewing reports or taking international calls. He was not a man given to leisure or personal relationships. Past experiences, including a particularly damaging early business partnership that had ended in betrayal, had taught him to be wary, to keep his emotional drawbridge permanently raised. He wasn't a womanizer in the typical CEO stereotype. Women were, like most personal connections, simply a distraction from his singular focus on his company. He was used to perfection, to control, to environments where every variable was accounted for. The messy, unpredictable nature of human emotion was something he found inefficient and largely irrelevant to his goals. He wasn't intentionally unkind, but his obliviousness to the nuances of personal interaction often came across as coldness or arrogance. He barely registered Lily's presence beyond her functional role, another well-oiled cog in the machine of his life, until that shocking, accidental intrusion into her private space. The days following the incident were a torment of unspoken tension for both Ethan and Lily. Lily, if it were possible, became even more ethereal, a whisper of movement in the vast penthouse. She timed her duties to avoid him, her footsteps lighter than dust, her head perpetually bowed. If their paths did cross, a wave of color would flood her cheeks, her eyes darting away as if his gaze might physically burn her. The shame was a palpable aura around her, mixed with a profound fear that made her movements jerky and her breath catch whenever he entered a room. She was convinced her dismissal was imminent, that any moment he would summon her to deliver the inevitable news. Every polite instruction, every neutral glance from him, felt laden with unspoken condemnation, or worse, a prelude to some unknown, dreadful consequence. For Ethan, the penthouse, once his sanctuary of controlled order, now felt disturbed. The image of Lily in her vulnerable state, the sheer, unadulterated innocence and terror in her eyes, replayed in his mind with an insistent, unwelcome frequency. It wasn't a leering memory, it was something far more unsettling. It was the innocence, stark and undefended, that had struck him like a physical force. It was a quality so alien to his own life, to the cynical, power-driven world he navigated, that it had lodged itself in his consciousness like a foreign object, irritating and impossible to ignore. He found himself listening for her quiet footsteps, noticing the scent of the lemon polish she used, the way she always left a single, perfectly placed flower from the weekly arrangement on his otherwise stark desk. These were details he had never registered before, details of a life lived quietly and diligently in the periphery of his own. He tried to dismiss it, to bury the memory under the weight of quarterly projections and market analyses, but it resurfaced at the most inconvenient times during a critical negotiation in the middle of the night, even as he stood before his board of directors. This haunting, as he reluctantly began to acknowledge it, was not of a ghost, but of a purity he had unknowingly violated, and which now, perversely, captivated him. He attempted to resume his usual detached demeanor, but something had irrevocably shifted. When he needed to give Lily instructions, he found his voice was a fraction softer, his requests less like imperial decrees. He caught himself observing her as she meticulously dusted his collection of abstract sculptures, her movements graceful and precise, her focus absolute. There was a quiet dignity about her, even in her menial tasks, even in her evident fear of him. One afternoon, he overheard his notoriously demanding mother, during a rare and unwelcome visit, speaking sharply to Lily over a minor issue with the tea service. Before he could analyze his own impulse, Ethan found himself intervening, his tone clipped and cool as he redirected his mother's displeasure, effectively shielding Lily. The look of startled gratitude Lily shot him before quickly lowering her eyes again was another small, sharp pang in his chest. He told himself it was merely about maintaining order, about not allowing his staff to be unduly harassed. But a deeper, unacknowledged part of him knew it was more than that. A strange, almost uncomfortable sense of protectiveness had begun to stir. Lily, of course, misinterpreted these subtle shifts. His occasional softer tone, his intervention with his mother, these didn't reassure her. Instead, they amplified her anxiety. Was he trying to lull her into a false sense of security before— What? The uncertainty was worse than outright anger. She became even more meticulous, more terrified of making the slightest error, convinced that any misstep would be the pretext he needed. She started losing sleep. Her appetite waned, the vibrant city outside her small window becoming a threatening landscape rather than a place of distant dreams. Ethan's internal struggle intensified. He was a man who prided himself on logic, on control. This preoccupation with his shy, unassuming maid, this persistent memory of her innocence, was illogical, inefficient, and deeply unsettling. He was annoyed with himself for his lack of focus, for the unfamiliar guilt that gnawed at him. Why her? Why this insignificant, accidental moment? He had encountered countless beautiful, sophisticated women, yet none had ever disarmed him, or rather disturbed him in this profound way. He tried to analyze it, to categorize the feeling, to relegate it to a momentary lapse, but it resisted all his attempts at rationalization. Her innocence wasn't just an absence of experience, it felt like an active, powerful force, a quiet rebuke to the cynicism that had long been his shield and his sword. He started to see the stark emptiness of his own life, the transactional nature of his relationships, the cold precision of his days, all thrown into sharp relief by the memory of her unblemished vulnerability. It was a deeply uncomfortable awakening. He was Ethan Maxwell, and he was haunted, not by a specter, but by the ghost of an innocence he hadn't known he'd been missing until he'd accidentally stumbled upon it. The haunting, as Ethan had termed it, did not lessen with time. It intensified, seeping into the cracks of his meticulously ordered life. Board meetings became a struggle for focus, complex algorithms blurred before his eyes, and the silence of his penthouse at night, once a welcome respite, now felt amplified, echoing with the memory of Lily Chen's wide, terrified eyes. It was her innocence, that profound, unshielded vulnerability, that clung to his thoughts like a burr. He found himself analyzing it, dissecting it, trying to understand why it had such a potent effect on him. This was not a predatory obsession. It was a deep, resonant disquiet, a persistent knocking at a door within himself he had long kept bolted. He began to truly see the opulence around him not as a testament to his success, but as a gilded cage, sterile and devoid of the simple, unpretentious warmth that Lily, in her brief devastating moment of exposure, had radiated. His own life, a relentless pursuit of more wealth, more power, more control, suddenly felt starkly empty, a hollow shell. He started observing Lily more closely, not with the intent of an employer scrutinizing staff, but with the baffled curiosity of an explorer who had stumbled upon an unknown species. He noticed the almost reverent care she took with his belongings, the way she would straighten a slightly askew picture frame with a gentle touch, or how she always ensured the temperature in his study was exactly to his preference, a detail he'd never explicitly requested, but which she had learned. He saw her once, through a barely open door, carefully tending to a wilting orchid on a distant windowsill, her expression soft with a concern that was entirely genuine. Another time, his driver reported that Lily had found a significant amount of cash, a carelessly dropped roll of bills from Ethan's pocket in the back of his car after he'd been dropped off, and had immediately, with flushed cheeks and downcast eyes, handed it over, refusing even the smallest token of thanks. These were not grand gestures, but small, consistent acts of quiet dignity, meticulous honesty, and an inherent gentleness that seemed to emanate from her very core. Each observation amplified the power of that initial, accidental glimpse. Her innocence was not a singular attribute, but the very fabric of her being. Driven by this persistent haunting and an unfamiliar stirring of something akin to conscience, Ethan began to act in ways that were entirely uncharacteristic. One morning, noticing Lily looked particularly pale and tired, the usual shadows under her eyes more pronounced, he found himself awkwardly instructing his personal chef, who usually only prepared Ethan's own Spartan meals, to ensure Miss Chen has access to nutritious meals throughout the day, a directive so out of the blue it left the chef momentarily speechless. He never mentioned it to Lily directly. On another occasion, he overheard her on a brief, hushed phone call in the corridor, her voice filled with a gentle reassurance as she spoke to someone, presumably a family member, about tuition fees and medical bills. The weight of her quiet responsibilities, her selfless dedication, settled upon him heavily. The next day, a substantial, anonymous donation was made to a scholarship fund at her younger brother's community college, routed through one of Ethan's more obscure, philanthropic arms. He told himself it was a strategic charitable contribution, nothing more. The truth that was gradually revealing itself to Ethan was not some hidden scandal or a shocking secret about Lily's past. It was a far more profound internal revelation about himself, catalyzed by her. He came to understand that Lily's innocence was not ignorance or naivety, but a powerful, uncorrupted purity of spirit, a steadfast adherence to an inner moral code that the cynical machinations of his world had failed to tarnish. It was something precious, something rare, something he realized with a startling clarity that he had either ruthlessly suppressed within himself or had never truly possessed. The haunting was the echo of his own lost or unformed conscience, a deep, unacknowledged yearning for the kind of authenticity Lily embodied so effortlessly. He began to see his own life, his relentless ambition, his emotional isolation, not as strengths, but as profound deficiencies. Lily, for her part, remained suspended in a state of anxious bewilderment. Mr. Maxwell's behavior was increasingly erratic by her standards. The initial terror had subsided into a constant wary vigilance, his occasional clumsy attempts at what might be construed as kindness, a softer tone, an inquiry about the room temperature, the unexpected availability of better food in the staff kitchen were more confusing than comforting. She didn't understand them. Were they traps? Were they a prelude to him finally addressing the incident? Every unexpected interaction sent her heart into a frantic rhythm, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. She redoubled her efforts to be invisible, to perform her duties flawlessly, hoping that by being the perfect silent employee, she could somehow erase that horrifying moment from his memory, and by extension, from her own. The imposing CEO had become an unpredictable enigma, and his penthouse, once just a place of employment, now felt like a minefield of unspoken tensions and confusing signals. The tipping point arrived on a Tuesday morning, a day like any other, yet imbued with the undercurrent of unspoken tension that had become their new normal. Lily, her nerves frayed from weeks of anxious vigilance, was arranging a new delivery of orchids in Ethan's office. Her hands, usually so steady, fumbled, and a delicate porcelain vase slipped, crashing to the marble floor and shattering into a dozen pieces. Water and an exotic bloom spread across the pristine surface. Lily froze, her face ashen, her heart leaping into her throat. This was it. The unforgivable mistake. Mr. Maxwell, with his exacting standards for perfection, would surely erupt. She braced herself for the inevitable dismissal, tears stinging her eyes. Ethan, who had been observing her from his desk, his gaze softened by thoughts he couldn't quite articulate even to himself, saw the accident. He saw her small frame tremble, the way she squeezed her eyes shut, as if anticipating a blow, and in that moment, something within him shifted decisively. The usual sharp retort, the impatient sigh, died on his lips. Instead, he rose slowly from his desk. "Lily," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, devoid of any anger. "It's all right. It's just a vase. Are you hurt?" Lily's eyes snapped open, wide with disbelief. She stared at him, a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, confusion, and a desperate, fragile hope warring on her face. This was not the reaction she had expected. This quiet concern, this unexpected gentleness, was more disarming than any anger could have been. It was so utterly out of character that it made the unspoken tension between them suddenly unbearable. The words tumbled out of her before she could stop them, a rushed, trembling whisper. "Mr. Maxwell, I don't understand. You've been different. Are you going to fire me? Is it because of before?" Her voice trailed off, her gaze dropping to the floor, unable to meet his. Ethan's heart clenched. Her fear, her assumption that his every action was a prelude to punishment, was a stark testament to the unintentional cruelty of his position and the lasting impact of that one accidental moment. He knew he couldn't let this continue. He had to try to explain, to alleviate her terror, even if it meant exposing his own bewildering vulnerability. He walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. "Lily," he began, his voice low and earnest, "what happened that day was an accident. My accident. I intruded upon your privacy, and I am profoundly sorry for the distress it clearly caused you. It was never my intention." He paused, searching for the right words. "And no, I am not going to fire you. You are an excellent employee. That vase is replaceable." She looked up at him then, her eyes still filled with a wary apprehension, but also a flicker of something else, a hesitant curiosity. "But you have been different, sir." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Yes, I have." He hesitated, then plunged ahead, needing her to understand, needing to unburden himself of the strange disquiet that had become his constant companion. "That moment, Lily, it affected me more than I can explain. It wasn't about what I saw in the way you might fear. It was something else." He struggled to articulate the profound shift within him. "It was your innocence, your vulnerability. It was so palpable. It made me see things about myself, about the life I lead." He looked away for a moment, towards the impersonal city skyline, then back at her, his gaze direct and surprisingly raw. "It's been haunting me, if I'm to be honest. Not in a bad way, not in the way that should make you afraid, but in a way that has made me question a great many things." Lily listened, her initial fear slowly receding, replaced by a profound astonishment. This powerful, intimidating man, this CEO who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, was standing before her, looking almost lost. He wasn't talking about lust or power or making light of her humiliation. He was talking about her innocence, about being haunted, about questioning his own life. It was the last thing she had ever expected to hear. She saw a flicker of the loneliness she had sometimes sensed in him, a genuine confusion in his eyes that mirrored her own. In that moment, the towering walls of his CEO persona seemed to crumble, revealing a glimpse of the man within, a man struggling with something unexpected and deeply personal. I don't know what to say," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving behind a fragile sort of wonder. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied, his voice softening further. He saw the fear in her eyes finally begin to recede, replaced by a tentative understanding. He saw not just the shy maid, but a woman of quiet depth, a woman whose spirit had inadvertently shaken his entire world. "I just wanted you to know that you are safe here, that the incident, it changed me more than it could ever reflect badly on you. It made me realize there are things, qualities, like your quiet dignity, your purity of spirit, that I haven't valued enough in my life." A long silence settled between them, no longer charged with fear and awkwardness, but with a new, fragile sense of shared humanity. He had, in his clumsy way, revealed not a desire to exploit, but a profound, almost reverent recognition of something he found rare and precious in her. And Lily, looking at this powerful man now stripped of his usual defenses, his own vulnerability laid bare, felt an unexpected stirring of empathy, a reluctant connection that transcended their disparate roles. The invisible line between employer and employee, between accidental voyeur and mortified victim, had been irrevocably crossed, not by a physical act, but by a moment of startling, unvarnished emotional honesty. The haunting had begun its slow transformation into something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like care. The conversation in Ethan's office, raw and revealing as it had been, did not magically erase the complexities of their situation. Instead, it ushered in a new era of heightened awareness and a profound, almost unbearable awkwardness. Lily, while no longer living in constant terror of dismissal, found herself navigating a different kind of minefield. Ethan Maxwell, the formidable CEO, now looked at her with an intensity that was no longer just observant, but deeply personal. His attempts at kindness, though clearly genuine, often felt clumsy, out of place, making her blush and stammer. He might ask if her quarters were comfortable, or if she needed anything, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, and she would murmur a polite affirmative, her heart fluttering with a confusing mix of gratitude and apprehension. She found herself oscillating between a reluctant empathy for the lonely man she had glimpsed behind the corporate armor, and a deep-seated wariness of his power and the undeniable impropriety of their charged dynamic. Ethan, too, struggled. The haunting had indeed begun to transform, the disquiet evolving into a potent cocktail of protective tenderness, profound respect, and an attraction that both bewildered and exhilarated him. But he was a novice in the language of genuine emotional connection. His attempts to bridge the chasm between them were often hesitant, ill-timed. He wanted to know more about her, the real Lily, not just the efficient maid, but he was terrified of overstepping, of frightening her further, of confirming her worst fears about men in his position. His ingrained habits of command and emotional detachment would sometimes resurface, especially when under pressure from work, leading to moments where he might unintentionally revert to his colder, more abrupt CEO persona. These instances would send Lily recoiling, her fragile, nascent trust instantly retracting, leaving Ethan frustrated with himself and the seeming impossibility of navigating this new, uncharted territory. The subtle shift in Ethan's demeanor towards Lily did not go entirely unnoticed within the insulated world of his executive floor. Whispers began to circulate amongst the other staff, a mixture of curiosity, envy, and suspicion. Why was the notoriously aloof Mr. Maxwell suddenly showing a modicum of personal interest in the quiet, almost invisible housekeeper? Lily felt the weight of their speculative glances, the sudden silences when she entered a room. It made her deeply uncomfortable, fueling her desire to simply disappear, to return to a life where she was anonymous and unobserved. The thought of quitting became a persistent companion, a seemingly sensible escape from a situation that felt increasingly fraught with emotional peril and potential scandal. She drafted her resignation letter several times, her hand hovering over the send button, torn between the need for self-preservation and a confusing, almost imperceptible reluctance to sever this strange, unexpected connection with Ethan. Ethan, sensing her unease and perhaps the burgeoning office gossip, knew he had to do something decisive, something that would demonstrate unequivocally that his interest in her was not a fleeting whim or a new form of exploitation. He needed to show her that he saw her value beyond her role in his household, beyond the accidental incident that had thrust them into this bizarre intimacy. He had, through discreet and respectful channels, not by further invading her privacy, but by reviewing the initial professional application she had submitted to the agency, learned of her quiet ambition to one day support her family more substantially, and perhaps even pursue further education herself, if finances ever allowed. He also knew from that overheard phone call weeks ago the extent of her financial burdens. One evening, he called her into his study. Lily entered, her heart pounding, expecting perhaps another awkward apology or worse, a dismissal dressed in polite terms. Instead, Ethan gestured to a chair, his expression serious but not unkind. "Lily," he began, "I've been giving a great deal of thought to your position here, and to your future." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I know you are a very capable and intelligent young woman, and I also know, from observations, that you carry significant responsibilities." He slid a folder across his desk. "This is a proposal. Vance Conglomerates has a new community outreach initiative that requires a dedicated coordinator, someone with empathy, organizational skills, and a genuine understanding of diverse community needs. The salary is substantially better than your current one, and it comes with a full educational grant for any field of study you might choose to pursue at a city university." Lily stared at the folder, then at him, speechless. "This isn't a gift, Lily," Ethan continued, his gaze steady. "It's an opportunity based on the qualities I have genuinely come to recognize in you, your diligence, your integrity, your quiet strength. Whether you take it or not is entirely your decision. There are no strings attached, but I wanted you to know that I see your potential, far beyond the excellent work you do in this penthouse." He also made it clear that if she chose to accept, her previous role would be filled, and their professional interactions would be strictly within the new context, unless she wished otherwise. He was offering her a ladder, a way out of her current vulnerability, a path to her own empowerment, without any personal demands. Lily was overwhelmed. This was not the action of a man looking to exploit or control. This was respect. This was an acknowledgement of her as a person, with dreams and capabilities. For the first time since the incident, a genuine, unreserved hope began to stir within her. It wasn't a solution to all the complexities between them, but it was a profound gesture, a clear demonstration that the Ethan Maxwell standing before her now was a far cry from the man who had accidentally shattered her composure weeks ago. The haunting of her, innocence had, it seemed, led him to an act of true, restorative grace. Her decision was still fraught with uncertainty, but the path of simply running away no longer felt like the only option. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a different journey back, a journey towards a new kind of understanding, not just for him, but for her as well. His pursuit, if it could even be called that now, had shifted from an internal, obsessive haunting to a tangible, respectful effort to see her thrive, and that more than anything began to slowly, cautiously, earn her trust. Lily, after much soul-searching, cautiously accepted Ethan's offer, not as a lifeline from a powerful man, but as a genuine opportunity she had earned through her own merit, an opportunity he had the grace to recognize and facilitate. She chose to coordinate the new community outreach program, a role where her empathy and quiet diligence shone. Their interactions, now framed by a professional respect and a burgeoning tentative friendship, slowly began to heal the scars of that initial, jarring encounter. The penthouse, once a symbol of her vulnerability and his detached power, gradually transformed. With Ethan's encouragement, small touches of Lily's warmth began to permeate its austere elegance. A vase of wildflowers she'd arranged, a comfortable throw on a stark sofa, the scent of home-cooked cookies occasionally drifting from the kitchen when she experimented with recipes for a community bake sale. The haunting that had once plagued Ethan evolved into a profound, peaceful love. He cherished Lily's spirit, her quiet strength, her unwavering moral compass. He learned to listen, truly listen, not just to her words, but to the gentle wisdom that lay beneath them. He became her staunchest supporter, celebrating her small victories in her new role, encouraging her to perhaps one day pursue the education she had put on hold. In turn, Lily saw Ethan shed the last vestiges of his icy CEO persona when he was with her, revealing a man capable of deep tenderness, surprising humor, and a genuine desire for connection. Her initial shyness around him lessened, replaced by a quiet confidence, the assurance that she was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who she was. Her innocence, once a source of her terror, now manifested as a clear, unwavering light that guided them both. Ethan Maxwell had accidentally seen his shy maid undressed, a moment that had shattered his controlled world. But it was her unveiled innocence, so stark and pure, that had truly stripped away his own defenses, haunting him until he confronted the profound emptiness of his gilded cage. He learned that true intimacy was never about a fleeting glimpse of the physical, but about the soul's quiet, unexpected recognition of its missing piece. And sometimes an accidental encounter, a moment of unintended vulnerability, is all it takes to redirect a life, not towards what is powerful or predictable, but towards what is genuinely, beautifully, and irrevocably true towards its heart. One evening, months later, Ethan found Lily curled up on the sofa in his study, a space that now felt as much hers as his, a soft lamp casting a warm glow as she read. He sat beside her, not speaking, simply content in her presence. She looked up, her lips curving into a gentle smile, her eyes no longer holding fear, only a deep, trusting affection. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The city lights twinkled beyond the vast window, no longer indifferent but a backdrop to their shared, peaceful silence. A silence filled not with ghosts of the past, but with the quiet promise of their future.
The shrill screech of tires against wet pavement pierced the morning air as Ethan Blackwood's Aston Martin came to an abrupt halt. Coffee splashed across the dashboard, and papers flew everywhere. Through the windshield, he locked eyes with the woman who had darted across the street, the very same woman who now stared back at him with a look of terror slowly morphing into indignation. "Are you out of your mind?" Ethan bellowed, stepping out of his car into the drizzling Seattle rain, his custom Italian suit immediately darkening with moisture. "Do you have any idea how close I came to—" "To what?" "Running me over because you were too busy texting to watch the road?" The woman's voice trembled slightly, but her hazel eyes remained steady as she clutched a worn portfolio to her chest. Her simple floral dress was now splattered with mud from the puddle his car had skidded through. Ethan's jaw clenched. At 37, he wasn't accustomed to being interrupted, especially not by someone who looked like she shopped at discount stores. "I was not texting." He gestured to his car, where his phone sat untouched in its holder. "But perhaps you should invest in glasses before jaywalking through downtown." "This is a crosswalk," she pointed out, gesturing to the faded white lines beneath their feet. A small crowd had gathered, cell phones raised. Perfect. Just what he needed. Another billionaire behaving badly headline for his PR team to manage. "Look, are you hurt?" Ethan asked, forcing a modicum of civility into his tone as rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. "No, but my portfolio is ruined." She opened the black case to reveal watercolor illustrations now bleeding together. In a muddy rainbow. "My interview was in 30 minutes. Something unexpected, guilt perhaps, twisted in Ethan's chest. "What interview?" "Housekeeper position at some rich guy's estate." She sighed, carefully closing the damaged portfolio. "I'm an artist, but bills don't pay themselves. Now I have nothing to show the employment agency." "What's your name?" he asked abruptly. "Olivia. Olivia Winters," she replied, suspicion narrowing her eyes. "And you're Ethan Blackwood?" "Yes, I recognize you from the business magazines my dad used to read." An idea formed in Ethan's mind, one that would solve both his current PR situation and another problem he'd been facing. His household manager had quit last week, citing his impossible standards and temperament as reasons. "Ms. Winters, I'd like to offer you a job." "Excuse me?" Olivia blinked raindrops from her lashes. "The position you were interviewing for? It was at my estate. Consider this your interview." He gestured between them and the growing crowd. "And congratulations, you're hired." "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious about business decisions," he cut her off. "Starting salary is twice whatever the agency quoted. You begin tomorrow." "I didn't accept yet," she protested. Ethan arched an eyebrow, rain streaming down his face. "Would you prefer I call the police to file an accident report instead? For a pedestrian who suddenly appeared in front of my vehicle?" Olivia's cheeks flushed with anger. "That's blackmail. That's negotiation." He retrieved a business card from his wallet and pressed it into her palm. 9 a.m. sharp. The address is on the card. Ask for Mrs. Collins at the gate." With that, he turned back toward his car, then paused to look over his shoulder. "And Ms. Winters? Don't be late. I detest tardiness almost as much as I detest jaywalkers." As Ethan drove away, he glimpsed Olivia in his rearview mirror, standing motionless in the rain, clutching his card like it might bite her. For the first time that day, a genuine smile tugged at his lips. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. What Ethan couldn't know was that Olivia, staring after his disappearing car, was making a solemn vow to herself. She would take his job offer, but only long enough to save money for art school, and perhaps make the arrogant billionaire's life a little more complicated along the way. The iron gates of Blackwood Manor parted with mechanical precision as Olivia approached, her beat-up Toyota Corolla sputtering in protest at the steep incline of the driveway. The mansion that came into view nearly caused her to slam on the brakes, in astonishment. It wasn't a house, it was a modern castle. Glass and steel stretched skyward in elegant angles, with floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the morning sunlight like diamonds. Pristine gardens surrounded the structure, meticulously manicured by what must have been an army of gardeners. "Well, this explains the god complex," Olivia muttered to herself, parking beside a fountain depicting Greek deities. Her watch read 55 a.m. She'd deliberately arrived early to spite Ethan's assumption that she'd be late. A silver-haired woman in an immaculate pantsuit greeted her at the entrance. "Ms. Winters, I presume. I'm Mrs. Collins, Mr. Blackwood's estate manager." "Former estate manager," came a deep voice from behind them. Ethan Blackwood descended a floating staircase, today dressed in casual luxury, a cashmere sweater and tailored pants that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly rent. "Mrs. Collins has been graciously training her replacement. That would be you." Olivia nearly choked. "Excuse me? I thought I was applying for a housekeeper position." "Change of plans. I need someone who can manage the entire household." His eyes traveled over her outfit, a simple blouse and slacks, the nicest she owned. "Your portfolio yesterday showed artistic sensibilities. That suggests an eye for detail." My portfolio was ruined, Olivia reminded him, irritation rising. I salvaged a few pieces. From a nearby table he retrieved her paintings, now carefully, dried and preserved. Your work shows talent, raw, undeveloped, but present. Olivia wasn't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. I can't manage an estate, I have no experience. Neither did I with running a tech empire at 23, Ethan replied with infuriating confidence. Yet here we are. Mrs. Collins offered Olivia a sympathetic smile. Don't worry, dear. I'll teach you everything before my retirement next month. Next month? Olivia's voice rose an octave. Is that a problem? Ethan challenged, crossing his arms. Olivia thought of her empty bank account, her dream of attending the prestigious Pacific Northwest Art Institute slipping further away with each passing day. The salary he'd mentioned would cover tuition in just 6 months. No problem at all, she replied with forced cheerfulness. Where do we start? The morning passed in a whirlwind as Mrs. Collins led her through the mansion. 12 bedrooms, 15 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, an indoor pool, a gallery, a home theater, and countless other rooms whose purposes seemed purely to showcase wealth. Olivia scribbled notes frantically, trying to memorize the complex staff schedule and Ethan's numerous particularities. Mr. Blackwood requires his coffee precisely at 6:15 a.m. Single origin Ethiopian black, Mrs. Collins instructed as they entered a kitchen larger than Olivia's entire apartment. His breakfast is protein-focused, no carbs. He has allergies to strawberries and hazelnuts. And mediocrity, Ethan added, appearing suddenly in the doorway. Don't forget my allergy to mediocrity. Olivia turned, startled. Do you always sneak up on people? It's my house. I don't sneak, I arrive. Mrs. Collins tactfully excused herself, leaving them alone in the gleaming kitchen. Why me? Olivia asked, unable to contain the question any longer. You could hire someone qualified, someone who knows which fork goes where at your fancy dinner parties. Ethan approached, stopping uncomfortably close. Because you stood in the rain yesterday and looked me in the eye when most people would have been intimidated. Because you need this job more than you're willing to admit. His voice dropped. And because I suspect having you around will be interesting. The way he said interesting sent an unwelcome shiver down Olivia's spine. I'm not here to entertain you, she replied coolly. No, Ethan agreed, a smile playing at the corner of his lips. You're here to run my household, starting with the charity gala I'm hosting this Saturday. This Saturday? Olivia's eyes widened. In panic. That's in 5 days. 5 days is plenty of time, he said dismissively. Unless you're not up to the challenge? Olivia squared her shoulders. I'll manage your gala, Mr. Blackwood, and it will be the best event this house has ever seen. As Ethan walked away, Olivia noticed the subtle smirk on his face and realized too late. He'd baited her, and she'd taken it hook, line, and sinker. What she didn't see was the genuine curiosity in Ethan's eyes as he glanced back at her from the doorway, or the way Mrs. Collins observed them both with knowing amusement. The wheels were already in motion for something neither of them had anticipated. The night of the charity gala arrived with a sky full of stars, and Olivia's nerves stretched to their breaking point. For 5 days, she had worked tirelessly, coordinating with caterers, florists, musicians, and the endless parade of vendors necessary for an event of this magnitude. Mrs. Collins had been a godsend, but Ethan had been suspiciously absent, leaving Olivia to wonder if this entire ordeal was some elaborate test. Now, hidden away in a small office adjacent to the grand ballroom, Olivia assessed her reflection in a compact mirror. The royal blue gown she wore, borrowed from Mrs. Collins's daughter, transformed her in ways she hadn't expected. For once, she looked like she belonged in these opulent surroundings. Ms. Winters? A staff member poked their head in. Mr. Blackwood is asking for you. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped into the ballroom, immediately overwhelmed by the result of her labor. The space glowed with thousands of tiny lights meant to mimic the night sky, while centerpieces featuring local artist sculptures adorned each table. her personal touch that had almost caused a mutiny from the event planner. She spotted Ethan immediately. How could she not? He stood, head and shoulders above most guests, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, commanding attention without effort. When his eyes found hers, something shifted in his expression. "Olivia," he said, approaching her with 2 champagne flutes, "you've outdone yourself." Is that actual praise from the great Ethan Blackwood? She accepted the champagne with a hint of a smile. I should record this historic moment. Don't get used to it. But there was no bite to his words. Though I must admit, incorporating local artists was inspired. That was the point, Olivia replied. A charity gala for arts education should actually showcase art. Ethan's gaze lingered on her face. You look different tonight. It's called makeup, Mr. Blackwood. No, he shook his head. It's confidence. It suits you. Before Olivia could respond, Seattle's mayor approached, pulling Ethan into conversation. Throughout the evening, Olivia flitted from crisis to crisis. A spilled drink here, a misplaced place card there. Always aware of Ethan's presence across the room, occasionally catching his eyes on her. It was nearly midnight when disaster struck. The dessert chef approached Olivia in panic. They'd accidentally included hazelnut in the chocolate soufflés already being served. Stop the service immediately, Olivia commanded, rushing through the crowd to find Ethan deep in conversation with potential investors. Without thinking, she snatched the spoon from his hand just as it hovered above the deadly dessert. What on earth? Ethan began. Hazelnuts, she whispered urgently. There's been a mistake in the kitchen. The investors chuckled, but Ethan's expression was unreadable as he excused himself, guiding Olivia to a private terrace with a firm hand on the small of her back. You remembered, he said simply, the moonlight casting shadows across his chiseled features. Of course I remembered. It's my job to keep you alive, apparently. She attempted levity, but her voice trembled slightly from the adrenaline. Is that the only reason you care if I live or die? His voice had dropped to a dangerous timbre that made her heart race. I don't care, Olivia lied, hyper-aware of his proximity. I just need this job until I save enough for art school. Art? School? Ethan's brow furrowed. You never mentioned that. You never asked, she countered softly. The revelation hung between them, shifting the atmosphere. Ethan moved closer, his hand still resting on her back. 5 days, he murmured. 5 days, and you've reorganized my staff, charmed my most difficult business associates, and now saved me from anaphylactic shock. Who are you, Olivia Winters? Just a girl standing in front of a billionaire, asking him not to fire her for manhandling his dessert, she quipped, though her humor barely masked her nervousness. To her astonishment, Ethan laughed, a genuine, rich sound she'd never heard from him before. I'm beginning to think hiring you was the smartest business decision I've made all year. Only beginning to think? Olivia raised an eyebrow. Their banter was interrupted by the sound of fireworks, the surprise finale she'd arranged. As they both turned to watch the display, Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness. I have a proposition, he said, eyes fixed on the bursting colors. Above. Stay on as my estate manager, and I'll fund your art school. Olivia turned to him in shock. That's not charity I'm looking for. It's not charity, Ethan replied, finally meeting her gaze. It's investment in talent. A beat passed. And perhaps in something more if you're amenable. The implication was clear, hanging between them like the fading embers of the fireworks. I don't mix business with pleasure, Olivia whispered, though she made no move to pull her hand from his. Then quit, Ethan suggested, his face inches from hers now. Effective immediately. You're impossible, she breathed, but the words held no malice. I prefer the term determined, he countered, and then his lips were on hers, tasting of champagne and possibility. When they parted, Olivia's practical side made one last stand. This is insane. We barely know each other. Sometimes, Ethan said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with unexpected tenderness, the best investments are the ones that seem the riskiest at first glance. 6 months later, Olivia's art hung in a prestigious gallery downtown, while she split her time between art school and a certain billionaire's estate, no longer as his employee, but as the woman who had taught Seattle's most infamous bachelor that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios, but in moments of genuine connection. And Ethan Blackwood, for his part, had learned that the most valuable mergers weren't always the ones that took place in boardrooms. Sometimes they happened on rainy crosswalks, in moonlit gardens, and in the quiet moments between two people who had found in each other the missing pieces they hadn't known they were searching for. The screeching of tires against wet pavement echoed through Manhattan's Upper East Side as Maxwell Blackwood slammed on the brakes of his matte black Lamborghini. A taxi had cut him off, causing him to nearly hydroplane across 3 lanes. Maxwell's knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as his Patek Philippe watch glinted in the morning light. Today was not the day for this. The merger documents needed his signature by noon, and his father had scheduled another dinner with the Astors to discuss the arrangement. $3 billion in assets, and I still have to put up with this prehistoric tradition, Maxwell muttered, running his fingers through his perfectly styled dark hair. Maxwell Blackwood, 32, named one of New York's most eligible bachelors 4 years running despite his notorious reputation, was being forced into an arranged marriage with Sophia Astor, heiress to the Astor Hotel empire. A business consolidation, disguised as matrimony. As the rain intensified, Maxwell spotted the small bookshop on the corner, Foxglove Books. He'd driven past it hundreds of times but never entered. Today, seeking refuge from both the storm and his thoughts, he parked illegally and dashed inside. The shop was warm, filled with the comforting scent of old pages and cinnamon. Unlike the cold, calculated world of high finance he dominated, this place felt authentic. Maxwell loosened his Italian silk tie, suddenly aware of how out of place his $12,000 suit looked amidst the worn leather chairs and overstuffed bookshelves. "Can I help you find something?" The voice was melodic, confident but gentle. Maxwell turned to find himself face to face with a woman so unlike those in his social circle that he momentarily forgot to respond. Auburn hair piled messily atop him, her head, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a freckled nose, and green eyes that showed not a hint of recognition or intimidation. Her name tag read, Emma. No, just browsing," he replied, uncharacteristically tongue-tied. Emma Hayes nodded politely but looked unimpressed. "Well, new arrivals are on the table by the window. Classics are to your left. Coffee's free for customers." With that, she returned to a stack of books she was cataloging, leaving Maxwell standing there feeling oddly dismissed. Nobody dismissed Maxwell Blackwood, ever. "Actually," he said, approaching her desk with his usual swagger returning, "I'm looking for something rare." Emma looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Such as?" "First edition Fitzgerald, perhaps? Money's no object." Emma's laugh was genuine and caught him off guard. "Of course it isn't," she said, gesturing to his custom suit. "But I'm afraid we don't keep our first editions on the sales floor, Mr. Blackwood." "Maxwell Blackwood," he replied, waiting for the recognition to dawn. It didn't. "Well, Mr. Blackwood, those books are by appointment only. Our curator handles the rare books collection. I'm just the manager." Just the manager. There was nothing just about her. For a man accustomed to women falling over themselves in his presence, Emma's casual indifference was both infuriating and intoxicating. Before he could respond, his phone rang. His father. Maxwell declined the call and instead found himself saying, "Then I'd like to make an appointment." Emma handed him a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. Claire handles the appointments." "Not you?" "Not me," she confirmed, returning to her work. As Maxwell left the shop, merger forgotten, rain soaking through his jacket, he glanced back through the window. Emma was helping an elderly customer, laughing at something the woman said. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt like he was standing outside looking in at something genuine. He slid back into his Lamborghini, his mind already plotting a return to Foxglove Books. The merger could wait. The Astors could wait. Maxwell Blackwood had just found something far more interesting than business deals and arranged marriages, and he always got what he wanted. The following morning, Maxwell arrived at his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, his mind still lingering on the auburn-haired bookshop manager. His assistant, Tyler, was waiting with his usual espresso and a stack of urgent contracts. "Your father called 3 times, Tyler said, trailing behind Maxwell into his minimalist office. "And Ms. Astor's assistant wants to confirm dinner tonight at Le Bernardin." Maxwell loosened his tie. "Cancel dinner. Tell them something came up." Tyler's eyebrows shot up. "Cancel on the Astors. My father will survive." Maxwell interrupted, pulling out the small business card from his jacket pocket. "And call this number. I want an appointment at Foxglove Books, their rare books collection. Today." 2 hours later, Maxwell strode into the bookshop, this time in a deliberately casual cashmere sweater that still cost more than most people's monthly rent. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully and Maxwell scanned the space for Emma. Instead, he was greeted by a petite woman with silver hair. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Claire Winters, Rare Books curator. Your assistant was quite persuasive about fitting you in today." Maxwell flashed his practiced smile. "I appreciate it. Is Emma working today?" Claire's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Ms. Hayes is in the back. She'll be out shortly." She gestured toward a door marked, "Staff Only." "Shall we begin with the Fitzgeralds you inquired about?" Before Maxwell could respond, Emma emerged carrying a stack of books that nearly obscured her face. Today she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, her hair in a loose braid down her back. Maxwell instinctively moved to help, taking half the stack from her arms. "Oh, thank you," she said before realizing who stood before her. Her smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, you're back." "Maxwell," he corrected, holding the books with ease. "And yes, I had some time between meetings." Emma rolled her eyes. "Of course you did. Claire, are you showing him the first editions?" "I was about to," Claire replied, noticing the tension between them with unconcealed amusement. "I can take over," Emma offered unexpectedly. "You should rest your knee, doctor's orders." Claire looked between the two of them and smiled. How thoughtful. The Fitzgeralds are already on the table in the reading room. Left alone with Emma, Maxwell followed her to a small, cozy room lined with glass-enclosed bookshelves. A single table sat in the center with white gloves and a first edition of The Great Gatsby waiting. "So," Emma began professionally, "what brings a man like you to collect first editions? Investment opportunity? Status symbol?" Maxwell set down the books he'd carried. "Do you always judge your customers so quickly?" "Only the ones who arrive in Lamborghinis and name-drop their wealth within the first minute of conversation," she replied. But her eyes held a glimmer of humor. For once, Maxwell felt seen through his facade. "Fair enough. My grandfather collected books. Real books, not just status symbols. He left me his collection when he died." Emma's expression softened at the unexpected vulnerability. "And what was his favorite?" "Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. He said it reminded him that true strength isn't about conquering but enduring." Emma handed him the white gloves. "Put these on, and tell me more about this grandfather who sounds nothing like the Maxwell Blackwood I've read about in the business pages." Maxwell paused, gloves halfway on. "You Googled me?" "After you left yesterday, hard to miss New York's most ruthless bachelor billionaire." She mimicked quotation marks with her fingers. Maxwell laughed genuinely. "Don't believe everything you read." "I generally don't," she replied, carefully opening the Fitzgerald first edition. "That's why I read the actual court documents about how you dismantled that family-owned publishing house last year." Maxwell's smile faded. He hadn't expected to be called out so directly, especially not by someone whose eyes could switch from warm to challenging in an instant. Before he could defend himself, his phone rang again. His father. Again. Aren't you going to get that? Emma asked. Maxwell silenced the phone. No, I'd rather hear more about why you think I'm the villain in this story. Emma's laugh was unexpected and bright. Oh, I don't think you're the villain, Mr. Blackwood. Maxwell. Maxwell, she conceded. I think you're the protagonist who doesn't realize he's in the wrong story. Their eyes locked, the rare book momentarily forgotten. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt the thrill of meeting someone who wouldn't be easily impressed or acquired. Someone who saw through the Blackwood armor to something he himself had almost forgotten existed. The moment was shattered by Maxwell's assistant calling. This time he answered. What is it, Tyler? The Astors are where? Stall them. I'll be there in 20. He hung up, regret evident on his face. I have to go. Family business. Emma nodded, professional once more. Of course. The appointment fee is $250 for the hour, even if you don't use it all. Worth every penny, Maxwell replied, removing the gloves. Same time tomorrow? We're booked tomorrow. The day after? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But next time, maybe come with actual questions about the books. As Maxwell left, Claire approached Emma with a knowing smile. He's not just here for the Fitzgeralds, is he? Emma watched Maxwell's retreating figure through the window. No, but whatever he is here for, it's not going to end well. Men like that don't change their stories. Yet as she returned to cataloging, Emma couldn't help but wonder about the glimpse of genuine passion she'd seen when Maxwell spoke about his grandfather. Perhaps there were chapters to Maxwell Blackwood that hadn't made the tabloids after all. You canceled dinner with the Astors to visit a bookshop? Harrison Blackwood's voice boomed across the private dining room of his exclusive club. Have you lost your mind, Maxwell? Maxwell maintained his composure, swirling the 30-year-old scotch in his glass. I had a prior engagement. With books? Harrison scoffed. The merger with Astor Hotels depends on this union. Do you understand what's at stake? Perfectly, Maxwell replied coolly. What I don't understand is why, in 2025, we're still arranging marriages like medieval royalty. Harrison leaned forward, lowering his voice. The Astors are selling to someone. If not to us, then to Zhang International. We lose the Asian market instantly. Then buy them out the normal way. They won't sell without the marriage guarantee. It's how they ensure family legacy. Harrison's expression softened marginally. Maxwell, I didn't raise you to be weak. One dinner, one marriage, for the future of Blackwood Industries. Maxwell thought of Emma's words, the protagonist who doesn't realize he's in the wrong story. For the first time, he wondered if she was right. 2 days later, Maxwell returned to Foxglove Books, this time carrying a worn copy of The Old Man in the Sea. The shop was busy with afternoon customers. Emma moved efficiently between shelves, helping an elderly man find a mystery novel, then directing a young couple to the poetry section. She wore jeans and a forest green sweater that made her eyes even more striking. When she spotted Maxwell, she checked her watch. You're early. I know, he admitted. I wanted to see how this place actually runs. It's different. Emma raised an eyebrow. Different from dismantling family businesses in boardrooms. Touché. Maxwell held out the Hemingway. My grandfather's copy, I thought you might want to see it. Surprise flickered across Emma's face as she gently took the book. She opened it carefully, finding annotations in the margins, a pressed flower between pages, a life contained in the notes. This is personal, she said quietly. Why show me? Maxwell hesitated. To prove I'm not just the villain from the business pages. A genuine smile spread across Emma's face. Well, it's a start. They moved to the rare books room, where Emma had prepared several Hemingway first editions alongside the Fitzgeralds. As Maxwell examined them, their conversation flowed naturally from literature to art to travel. You've really never been to Paris? Maxwell asked incredulously. Emma shelved a book. Some of us don't have private jets, Maxwell. You should see it. The small bookshops along the Seine. You'd love Shakespeare and Company. Someday, Emma replied with a wistful smile. After I finish my PhD in literature. You're working on a doctorate? Nights and weekends, 4 years in. Just need to finish my dissertation on forgotten female modernist writers. Maxwell watched her speak passionately about her research, her hands animated, eyes bright. Something shifted in his chest. Admiration, not just attraction. Have dinner with me, he said suddenly. Emma's expression closed off. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because men like you don't date women like me, Maxwell. We both know this isn't real life. What if I want it to be? Emma studied him carefully. Then prove it. Come to our reading group tomorrow night. No designer clothes, no name dropping. Just you and some actual book lovers discussing Virginia Woolf. Maxwell hesitated only briefly. Deal. The reading group was held in the bookstore after hours. Mismatched chairs arranged in a circle, wine in plastic cups. Passionate readers from all walks of life. Maxwell arrived in jeans and a simple button-down, carrying his well-read copy of To the Lighthouse. Emma's surprise at seeing him quickly turned to amusement as he struggled to keep up with the heated literary debates. But when he finally spoke about the lighthouse as a symbol of unattainable perfection, the group fell silent considering his perspective. Afterward, as they closed up the shop, Emma approached him. You actually read it. Cover to cover, Maxwell confirmed. Twice, actually. Why? Because you challenged me. And because... He stepped closer. I wanted to understand what matters to you. The air between them charged with tension. Emma's phone chimed with a text, breaking the moment. It's my roommate, she said, checking the message. Water pipe broke in our apartment, everything's flooded. Let me help, Maxwell offered immediately. Emma shook her head. This isn't a problem you can throw money at. No, Maxwell agreed. But I can throw time at it, and maybe some actual plumbing skills you don't know I have. Emma looked skeptical. You know plumbing? My grandfather believed every man should know how to work with his hands. Let me help, Emma. As a friend. The word friend hung between them, both knowing it wasn't quite right, but neither ready to name what was growing instead. The apartment was indeed a disaster. Water soaking the hardwood floors, books hastily piled on tables. Emma's roommate, Zoe, a surgical resident, was attempting to contain the leak with pots and pans. You must be the billionaire, Zoe said, bluntly when Maxwell walked in. Tonight I'm just the plumber, Maxwell replied, rolling up his sleeves. For 3 hours, Maxwell worked alongside them, finding the damaged pipe, making a temporary fix, helping move furniture, salvaging Emma's book collection. His hands blistered, his clothes soaked, but something about the simple physical work felt liberating. As they finally collapsed on the one dry couch, drinking beer and eating pizza, Maxwell realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so normal, so present. Emma watched him curiously. You're full of surprises, Blackwood. Good ones, I hope. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then Maxwell's phone rang, Sophia Astor's name flashing on the screen. Reality crashed back. Maxwell declined the call, but the damage was done. Emma had seen the name. Sophia Astor? She asked quietly, as in Astor Hotels? Maxwell's silence was answer enough. Let me guess, Emma continued, her voice growing distant. Arranged merger disguised as marriage? Maxwell reached for her hand, but she pulled away. It's complicated. No, Emma said firmly. It's actually very simple. You're engaged, or as good as. And I'm the foolish distraction. You're not a distraction, Emma. Then what am I, Maxwell? Because from where I'm standing, I'm just another acquisition that caught your eye. A novelty. The quaint bookshop manager who doesn't fall at your feet. Maxwell stood frustrated. That's not fair. Neither is letting me believe you're available when you're not, Emma replied, her voice breaking slightly. I think you should go. As Maxwell left the apartment, he felt the weight of two worlds colliding, the life he was expected to lead and the one he was discovering he wanted. For a man accustomed to getting everything he desired, Maxwell Blackwood was suddenly faced with an impossible choice. 3 days passed without Maxwell returning to Foxglove Books. 3 days of Emma jumping whenever the bell above the door chimed, only to feel both relief and disappointment when it wasn't him. 3 days of telling herself it was better this way. "You're checking your phone again," Claire observed as they sorted new arrivals. "I'm not," Emma protested, pocketing her device. "He's engaged, Emma, to Sophia Astor. It's been in the business section all week." Emma froze. "What?" Claire handed her the tablet open to the New York Times business page. Blackwood-Astor merger solidified, wedding set for June. The photo showed Maxwell beside a stunning blonde woman, both smiling coolly at the camera, looking every inch the perfect power couple. "I knew," Emma said quietly. "I just didn't know it was official." Claire squeezed her shoulder. "Men like that don't change their stories, remember?" Emma nodded, returning to her work with determined focus. She had a dissertation to finish, a bookshop to manage, a life that had been perfectly fine before Maxwell Blackwood walked through her door. "You look miserable," Harrison Blackwood remarked as Maxwell stared out the penthouse window. "I'm fine," Maxwell replied automatically. "The announcement has been made. The contracts are being finalized." Harrison studied his son. "This is what we've worked for." Maxwell turned. "What you've worked for? Not me." "Don't be dramatic. The Astor girl is beautiful, connected, appropriate. Your mother approves." "I don't love her." Harrison laughed, sharply. "Love? This is business, Maxwell." "Maybe that's the problem," Maxwell said quietly. "My whole life has been business." Harrison's expression hardened. "We had an agreement." "No, you had expectations. I never agreed to any of this." Maxwell straightened his shoulders. "I'm not marrying Sophia. You'll destroy everything we've built. Then I'll rebuild it. Differently. Better." Maxwell headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Harrison demanded. Maxwell paused. "To fix the story I'm in." Emma was locking up Foxglove Books when a familiar Lamborghini screeched to a halt outside. Her heart raced as Maxwell emerged, his usual polished appearance replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We're closed," she called through the glass. "I know," Maxwell replied. "I need 5 minutes." "Congratulations on your engagement," Emma said flatly, refusing to unlock the door. "I'm not engaged." Emma pointed to her phone. "The New York Times disagrees." "The Times is wrong," Maxwell insisted. "I called it off." This gave Emma pause. She unlocked the door but remained in the doorway. "Why would you do that?" "It was the perfect business arrangement." "Because it was the wrong story." Maxwell stepped closer. "You were right, Emma. I was the protagonist in the wrong story. A story about acquisitions and mergers and hollow achievements." "And what story are you in now?" Emma asked, her voice wavering slightly. "I don't know yet," Maxwell admitted, "but I know it has to include you." Emma shook her head. "Maxwell, you can't just walk away from your life." "I'm not walking away from anything. I'm walking toward something." He took her hand. "I told my father I'm still taking over the company, but on my terms. No arranged marriages, no hostile takeovers of family businesses." "He agreed to that?" "Eventually. After I reminded him who controls the majority shares now." Maxwell smiled ruefully. "And after I pointed out that his own marriage was a love match, not a business merger." Emma finally allowed herself to really look at him. "And what about Sophia?" "Relieved, actually. Turns out she's been dating her bodyguard for years." Maxwell laughed. "We're restructuring as a straightforward business partnership instead." Emma felt the wall she'd built crumbling. "This is still crazy. We barely know each other." I know that you're brilliant and challenging and passionate about literature. I know that you see through facades and demand authenticity. I know that when you talk about books, your eyes light up like you're sharing secrets of the universe. Maxwell paused, vulnerability written across his face. And I know that I haven't felt truly alive in years until I walked into this bookshop. Emma's resolve weakened further. What exactly are you proposing here, Blackwood? A new chapter, he said simply. Starting with dinner, a real date. No pretenses, no business angles. Just two people seeing where this story goes. And if it doesn't work out? Then we tried, but Emma. Maxwell stepped closer. What if it does? The space between them hummed with possibility. Emma thought of all the reasons to say no, all the ways they were different, all the potential heartbreak. Then she thought of the annotations in his grandfather's book, the way he'd rolled up his sleeves to fix her apartment, the passionate insights about Virginia Woolf that had surprised everyone. One condition, she said finally. Name it. You fund a scholarship for my dissertation program. Not for me, she clarified quickly. For students who need it, who deserve the chance. Maxwell grinned. Already done. I called your department chair yesterday. You what? I believe in your work, Emma. In the voices you're trying to amplify. He reached for her hand. So, dinner? Emma felt the final brick in her wall topple. Yes, but not at some ridiculous 5-star restaurant where they serve foam instead of food. Your choice. Anywhere. The diner across from my apartment. Best pancakes in the city. Maxwell's smile widened. Pancakes for dinner? Scandalous. Get used to it, billionaire boy. Emma teased, finally allowing herself to smile back. My story comes with midnight breakfast and dog-eared paperbacks. Sounds perfect, Maxwell said. And as he leaned in to kiss her, Emma realized that sometimes the best stories are the ones you never see coming. 6 months later, Foxglove Books had expanded to include a rare books foundation that preserved and shared literary treasures with schools across the city. Maxwell's office now included a worn leather chair where he actually read the books he collected. Emma's dissertation received full funding, and she split her time between teaching literature and managing the bookshop she loved. Harrison Blackwood grudgingly admitted that Maxwell's new approach to business, ethical, sustainable, community-minded, was actually increasing their profits while rebuilding their reputation. As for Maxwell and Emma, they were taking their story one page at a time, discovering that the best plot twists are the ones that challenge you to become more than you were, that push you to write a better story than you imagined possible. Claire smiled knowingly whenever she caught them lost in conversation among the bookshelves, debating literature or planning their upcoming trip to Paris to visit those bookshops along the Seine. I told you men like that don't change their stories, Claire remarked to Emma one day. You were right, Emma agreed, watching as Maxwell helped a young boy find adventure books across the shop. He didn't change his story. No? Emma smiled. He found a better one to tell.